All right, so this is going to be another movie review. This was called Paths of Glory, 1957. Giving it 5 out of 5 stars. Love this flick. This is going to be another Stanley Kubrick movie. It explodes in the no man's land no picture ever dared cross before. Paths of Glory, Kirk Douglas. Now the screen blasts open the bombshell story of a colonel who led his regiment into hell and back, while their maddened general waited for them with a firing squad. Paths of Glory is a 1957 U.S. anti-war film directed by Stanley Kubrick from a screenplay he co-wrote with Calder Willingham and Jim Thompson. It is adapted from the 1935 novel of the same name by Humphrey Cobb, which in turn was based on the Sawane Corporal's affair during World War I. The film stars Kirk Douglas as Colonel Dax, the commanding officer of French soldiers who refused to continue a suicidal attack. They disobeyed orders, after which Dax defends them against charges of cowardice in a court-martial. It also features Ralph Meeker, Adolphe Menjou, George McReady, Timothy Carey, Joe Turkel, Wayne Morris, and Richard Anderson. The film was co-produced through Douglas's film production company, Berna Productions, and a joint venture between Stanley Kubrick and James B. Harris. Harris Kubrick Pictures, due to the film's negative depiction of the French military, it could not be filmed there and was instead shot in West Germany. It was likewise not released in France until 1972. Oh, the French, they always are bad at fighting wars. They have nobody to blame but themselves. Paths of Glory was released by United Artists on December 20th, 1957. It received critical acclaim and several international accolades, including a BAFTA Award nomination for the Best Film, and is considered one of the greatest war films ever made. In 1992, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. Production companies Berna Productions, Harris Kubrick Pictures Corporation, distributed by United Artists. Release dates November 1st, 1967. The Munich premiere, December 20th, 1957 in the U.S. Running time, 88 minutes. Country, United States. Language, English. A budget of $900,000 and a box office of $1.2 million. So it looked like it may have been a financial flop, or depending on the marketing budget, it might have been break even. In 1916, during World War I in northern France, French Major General Georges Bullard orders his subordinate, Brigadier General Paul Moreau, to take the anthill, a well-defended German position. Moreau refuses, citing the impossibility of success. When Bullard mentions a potential promotion, Moreau convinces himself the attack will succeed. In the trenches, Moreau throws a private out of the regiment for showing signs of shell shock. Moreau leaves the planning of the attack to Colonel Dax, despite Dax's protests. Before the attack, drunken Lieutenant Roger leads a nighttime scouting mission, sending one of his two men ahead, overcome by fear. While waiting for the man's return, Roget lobs a grenade, accidentally killing the scout. Corporal Paris, the surviving scout, confronts Roger, who denies wrongdoing and falsifies his report to Colonel Dax. The daylight attack on the ant hill is a total failure. Dax leads the first wave of soldiers into no man's land under heavy rifle and machine gun fire, but none of them reach the German trenches, and the follow waves refuse to attack. Moreau orders his artillery to fire on them to force them into the battlefield. The artillery commander refuses without written confirmation of the order. To deflect blame of the attack's failure, Moreau decides to court-martial 100 soldiers for cowardice. Brolard orders Moreau to reduce the number, and Moreau asks each company in the attacking wave to select one man. Roget picks Corporal Paris to keep him from testifying about the scouting mission. Private Farrell is deemed as social undesirable by his commander. Private Arnaud is chosen at random by lots, despite being decorated twice for heroism. Dax, a criminal defense lawyer in civilian life, volunteers to defend the men at their court-martial. The trial, however, is a farce. It's a kangaroo court. There is no formal written indictment. A court stenographer is not present, and the court refuses to admit evidence that would support acquittal. In his closing statements, Dax angrily denounces the proceedings as fraud. Dax later informs Brolard that Moreau had ordered their artillery to fire onto French soldiers. Sentence of death is confirmed, and the condemned men are ordered shot by firing squad. This is like Cuban revolutionaries here running the French army. Following the executions, Brolard tells Moreau that he will be investigated for shelling his own men. Moreau denounces this as a betrayal by his commanding officer. Brolard offers Moreau's vacant command to Dax, assuming Dax's attempts to stop the executions were a ploy to gain Moreau's job. Discovering Dax was sincere, Brolard rebukes him for his idealism, and Dax in turn denounces Brolard's nihilism. After the execution, some of Dax's soldiers carouse loudly at an inn, but grow more subdued as they listen to then join in with the captive German girl as she sings a sentimental German folk song, The Faithful Hussar. Now I know how my grandparents met during World War II, probably similar scenario. The title of Cobb's novel came from the ninth stanza of Thomas Gray's poem, Elegy, written in Country Churchyard, 1951. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. The book was a mirror success when published in 1935, retelling the true life affair of 4 French soldiers who were executed to set an example to the rest of the troops that it's okay to commit suicide on the battlefield. The novel was adapted to the stage the same year by Sidney Howard, World War I veteran and scriptwriter of Gone with the Wind. pretty decent Civil War movie. The play was a flop on Broadway because of its harsh anti-war scenes that alienated the audience. I think my son was alienated too when he started hearing the sounds of trench warfare. He told me to turn down the volume. Nonetheless, Nonetheless, Howard continued to believe in the relevance of the subject matter, and Howard thought it should be made into a film. Writing, it seems to me that our motion picture industry must feel something of a sacred obligation to make that picture. Fulfilling Howard's sacred obligation, Stanley Kubrick decided to adopt it to the screen after he remembered reading the book when he was younger. Kubrick and his partners purchased the film rights from Cobb's widow for $10,000. Gray's stanza reflects Kubrick's feelings about war as well, and that becomes clear in the narrative of the film. A long battle for something with such an unimportant name as the Anthill. Some of Kubrick's unrealized projects contained themes of war as well. Kubrick once told a New York Times journalist, "Man isn't a noble savage, he's an ignoble savage. He is irrational, brutal, weak, silly, unable to be objective about anything where his own interests are involved." That about sums it up. I'm interested in the brutal and violent nature of man because it's a true picture of him, and any attempt to create social institutions on a false view of the nature of man is probably doomed to failure. Paths of Glory is based loosely on the true story of the Soane Corporal's affair when 4 French soldiers were executed in 1915 during World War I under General Gerard Revelhac for failure to follow orders. The soldiers were exonerated posthumously in 1934. The novel is about the French execution of innocent men to strengthen others' resolve to fight. The French army did carry out military executions for cowardice, as did most of the other major participants, excluding the United States of America and Australia. The United States sentenced 24 soldiers to death for cowardice, but the sentences were never carried out. However, a significant point in the film is the practice of selecting individuals at random and executing them as punishment for the sins of the whole group. This is similar to the Roman practice of decimation, which was rarely used by the French army in World War I. Kubrick said of his decision to make a war film, one of the attractions of a war or crime story is that it provides an almost unique opportunity to contrast an individual or our contemporary society with a solid framework of accepted value. It becomes fully aware of, and which can be used as a counterpoint to a human individual emotional situation. Further, war acts as a kind of hothouse for forced, quick breeding of attitudes and feelings. Attitudes crystallize and come out into the open. Conflict is natural when it would be in a less critical situation, have to be introduced almost as a contrivance and would thus appear forced or even worse, false. Although Kubrick's previous film, The Killing, had failed at the box office, one of the greatest film noirs of all time. It's got to be in the top 10. It had managed to land on several critical top 10 lists for the year. Dor Sherry, the head of production at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, liked the film. Dor Sherry at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer hired Kubrick and Harris to develop film stories from MGM's pile of scripts and purchased novels. Finding nothing they liked, Kubrick remembered reading Cobb's book at the age of 14 and the great impact it had upon him, and suggested it as their next project. Sherry strongly doubted the commercial success of the story, which had already been turned down by every other major studio. After Sherry was fired by MGM in a major shakeup, Kubrick and Harris managed to interest Kirk Douglas in a script version that Kubrick had done with Calder Willingham. After reading the script, Kirk Douglas was impressed. Kirk Douglas managed to get an advance for a $1 million budget from United Artists to help produce the film. Of the roughly $1 million budget, more than a third was allocated to Kirk Douglas's salary. Prior to the involvement of Douglas and his Bryna production company, no studio had shown interest in the seemingly non-commercial subject matter and filming in black and white. MGM rejected the idea of the film based on fears that the film would be unfavorable to European distributors and audiences, i.e. French. United Artists agreed to back it with Douglas as a star. Kubrick eventually hired Calder Willingham to work on the scripts of Paths of Glory, 1957, of which Jim Thompson had written earlier drafts. The specific contributions by Kubrick, Thompson, and Willingham to the final script were disputed, and the matter went to arbitration with the Writers Guild, some kind of Hollywood weird union for scriptwriters. Willingham claimed that Thompson had minimal involvement in the final script of the film, claiming responsibility for 99% of Paths of Glory for himself, and that Thompson had not written any of the dialogue. When Thompson's draft screenplay was compared to the final film, it was clear that Thompson had written 7 scenes, including the reconnaissance mission and the scene with soldiers the night before their executions by the firing squad. In the end, the Writers Guild attributed the script in the order of Kubrick, Willingham, and then Thompson. Parts of the screenplay were taken from Cobb's work verbatim. However, Kubrick made several changes to the narrative of the novel in his adoption, most notably his shift of focus to Colonel Dax as opposed to Paris, Farrell, and Arnaud as in the novel. One speculated addition is when General Moreau says, "Show me a patriot and I'll show you an honest man." And Colonel Dax responds that Samuel Johnson once said, "Patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel." Primarily, Kubrick and Thompson had added a happy ending to the film to make the film more commercial to the general public, where the men's lives are saved from execution at the last minute by the general. However, these changes were reversed back more closely to the original novel at the demand of Kirk Douglas. It led to a first major argument between director and star, who thought Kubrick had been rewriting the script behind his back. I called Stanley to his room. I hit the ceiling. I called him every 4-letter word I could think of. I got the money based on that original script, not for this piece of poop. I threw the script across the room. We're going back to the original script, or we're not making the picture. Stanley never blinked an eye. We shot the original script. I think the movie is a classic, one of the most important pictures, possibly the most important picture Stanley Kubrick has ever made. I don't know. I'll go with This one, Full Metal Jacket and Clockwork Orange as his top three. On the Criterion Collection Blu-ray, James B. Harris claims to have gotten this ending past distributors by sending the entire script instead of just the reversed ending, in the knowledge that those distributors would not read through the whole script again. After viewing the film, United Artists was happy with the changes and they left the ending as it is. Production took place entirely in Bavaria, Germany, especially at the Schleitzerheim Palace near Munich. Tim Carey was fired during production. He was reportedly extremely difficult to work with, even to the extent of faking his own kidnapping, holding up the whole production. He was replaced in the scenes remaining to be shot with a double. The film cost slightly less than $1 million and just about broke even, as mentioned earlier. My mathematics skills are still superb when it comes to calculating film profits. Kubrick on the set of Paths of Glory. There's a 1957 publicity photo of the aforementioned young-looking Stanley Kubrick. Black and white photo from 1957 on Wikipedia. Due to having 3 years military training, around 600 German police officers were used as extras for soldiers. The last scenes filmed were those that take place on the battlefield. For the construction of the battlefield, Kubrick hired 5,000 square yards, or 0.4 hectares, of land from a local farmer. It took Kubrick a month to set up the filming of the assault, arranging props and tearing up the field to look like a war zone. For the filming of the battle sequence, the battlefield was divided into 5 regions where explosive charges were specifically placed. This made it easier for Kubrick to film the dying of extras as he split the extras into 5 groups, one from each of the regions, and each man would die in his own zone by an explosion that was near him. An early critical test of Kubrick's obsession with control on the set came during the making of Paths of Glory, as recalled by Kirk Douglas. He made the veteran actor Adolphe Menjou do the same scene 17 times. "This was my best reading," Menjou announced. "I think we can break for lunch now." It was well past the usual lunchtime, but Kubrick said he wanted another take. Menjou went into an absolute fury. In front of Douglas and the entire crew, he blasted off on what he claimed was Kubrick's dubious parentage and made several other unprintable references to Kubrick's relative greenness in the art of directing actors. Kubrick merely listened calmly, and after Menjou had sputtered to an uncomplimentary conclusion, said quietly, "All right, let's try the scene once more." With other docility, Menjou went back to work. Stanley instinctively knew what to do, Douglas says. The only female character in the film, the woman who sings "The Faithful Hussat," is portrayed by German actress Christine Harlan, credited in the film as Suzanne Christian. She and Kubrick later married. The couple remained together until his death in 1999. It was on set that they originally had met. Paths of Glory employs both camera work and audio cues to create a sense of realism. thus making it easier for the audience to sympathize with the plight of the accused soldiers. In the beginning of the film, a snare drum plays, and the music is reminiscent of war-era newsreels. During the battle sequences, the camera keeps pace with the soldiers, but in other ways. The shots look like old trench warfare footage from World War I. The film's choice of black and white further emphasizes its similarity to the actual newsreels of the conflict. Richard Anderson, who played the acerbic prosecutor, recalled of Kubrick, "As soon as we started shooting, I knew immediately what Stanley was interested in, the shot, always the shot. He worked with George Caruso, the German cinematographer, to make sure that everything looked like a newsreel of World War I. Kubrick had studied many photographs of the war in the library. The film was low-keyed and had a grainy look to it. That's what Stanley was interested in." Kubrick's vision of war was far bleaker than that of some other films of that era, which also influences the director's choice to shoot the picture in black and white. The visuals also allow the audience to see the difference between life in the trenches and life in the command. From the opulent mansion of the high-ranking officers, the audience notices wide shots from the exterior and the interior. The viewer misses nothing. Every decadent piece of furniture, jewelry, or bauble that the senior officers have, in sharp contrast to the trenches where the shots are much tighter. Close-ups and point-of-view shots, e.g. from Colonel Dax's perspective, are cramped and tight, suffocating for the audiences. Switching to a shot in front of Dax's person, e.g. a walking shot, the audience becomes much like the other soldiers accompanying him in the trenches, feeling stuck and trapped in the confined and dangerous space. The musical score by Gerald Fried makes an extensive use of percussion instruments, specifically military drums. Kubrick used sound, or the lack thereof, to build tension and suspense in the film, particularly towards the beginning when the three soldiers are given orders to check on the anthill. The scene is in silence with no use of non-diegetic sound working well to add depth and rawness. Much of what the viewer can hear throughout the film is explosions in the distance and the sound of a whistle being blown, further adding to the overall documentary style of the film. The lack of a big, bold score gives no suggestion of heroism to the plot of the film, and the sounds of people dying are a common trope associated with Stanley Kubrick's films. The song towards the end happens within the narrative. In the tavern with the French soldiers of Dax's regiment, a young woman sings a traditional German folk song of that era, Der True Hussar, or Du True Hussat. With Kubrick's use of and seeing, the audience is able to see the German woman's performance bring the men to tears through various close-ups and angles. The troopers begin to hum and eventually sing along to the tune in expression of their basic humanity. As of Glory later ends in the same way it began, with the familiar snare drum roll used in the opening, indicative of a lack of change throughout the film. Kubrick's use of sounds and song functions as a kind of narration for the audience, linking each sound to a later or earlier scene in the film. The film had its world premiere in Munich, Germany on November 1st, 1957, a month and a half before that event. On September 18th, a special screening of Kubrick's production was also presented in Munich, but then to a very select audience. Avenger Sticks is in the chat room. Love this film. I had it on Criterion once. Yeah, it is a Criterion Collection DVD. We'll get into that later. A month and a half before that event, on September 18th, a special screening of Kubrick's production was also presented in Munich, but then to a very select audience. Frank Gordon, reporting from the Bavarian capital for the widely read New York trade paper Variety, describes the earlier presentation in the paper's September 27th issue. Munich, September 18th. 300 specially invited local VIPs, Army brass, Radio Free Europe staffers, German stage and film luminaries mingled with Kirk Douglas, Janet Leigh, Tony Curtis, and Ernest Borgnine to see a not-for-review showing of Jim Harris's Munich film Paths of Glory. Douglas, who stars in Paths, is presently shooting his own Burna-produced Vikings in the city's Geiselgastig Studios. Vikings co-stars Curtis, Borgnine, and Leigh, a World War I action story. Paths will be released through United Artists, also a Burna production. It was directed by Stanley the Killing Kubrick. I've got to see Vikings now. I've got to add that to my list. In the United States, the picture was not officially released nationwide until January 1958, although it was shown in two major cities prior to that, in Los Angeles, California, at the Fine Arts Theater on December 20th, 1957, and then 5 days later on Christmas Day in the New York City at the Victoria Theater. The U.S. trade journal Motion Picture Daily explained at the time that Paths was being shown. I'm sorry, Paths. Okay, the U.S. trade journal Motion Picture Daily explained at the time that Paths was being shown in those cities before the end of 1957 to ensure the film would qualify for nominations for the next Academy Award ceremonies, which were to be held on March 26, 1958. Assessments vary with regards to the film's ultimate success at the box office, with some sources citing it as a modest financial success and others noting that it only managed to recoup most, if not all, of its production costs. The film did, however, earn Kubrick widespread critical acclaim, while it also generated widespread controversy, especially in Europe. There's the trailer on Wikipedia. Although the film did not receive a single nomination for the Academy Awards of 1958, it was nominated for and collected several international awards. Those awards and many positive reviews from film critics further enhanced Kubrick's already growing reputation. The film was nominated for a BAFTA award under the category Best Film, but lost to The Bridge on the River Kwai. The production also received in Finland the Jussi Awards Diploma of Merit, was nominated for a Writers Guild of America Award in 1959 and won the prestigious Grand Prix of the Belgian Film Critics Association. Kubrick himself received on February 17, 1959, in Rome the Italian Critics Silver Ribbon, an award recognizing him as the best foreign director of 1958 for his movie Paths of Glory. On its release, the film's anti-military tone was subject to severe public criticism and governmental censorship. In France, both active and retired personnel from the French military vehemently criticized the film and its portrayal of the French army after it was released in Belgium. The French government placed enormous pressure on United Artists, the European distributor, not to release the film in France. The film was eventually shown in France in 1975 when anti-war attitudes were more acceptable. Thanks to the Vietnam War, I guess. The film was withdrawn from the Berlin Film Festival to avoid straining relations with France. It was then not shown in Germany until 2 years after its theatrical release in the United States. In Spain, the fascist government of Francisco Franco objected to the film. It was not shown there until 1986, 11 years after Franco's death. The Swiss government banned any presentations of the film until 1970 on the grounds that it was incontestably offensive to France, its judicial system, and its army. The film was banned in all in the United States military establishments, both at home and overseas, due to its content. No, don't show warriors that anti-war film. Despite the film's harsh reception in Europe by various governments, French war veterans, and media outlets in the months after the motion picture's initial screenings in the United States, reactions to Kubrick's productions featured in U.S. newspapers and trade publications were generally positive. Nevertheless, perceived deficiencies in the film's structure and content were expressed by some of the nation's leading reviewers in 1957 and 1958. In his December 26, 1957 review for the New York Times, Bosley Crowther credits Kubrick for creating a visually terrific, highly intense picture. In particular, Crowther draws attention to the story's execution scene, which he described as one of the most craftily directed and emotionally lacerating that we have ever seen. He does, though, also identify two troubling flaws that he saw in the film, one being within the realm of technique, the other within the realm of significance. We feel that Mr. Kubrick and Mr. Douglas have made a damaging mistake in playing it in colloquial English with U.S. accents and attributes, while studiously making it look as much as possible like a document of the French army in World War I. The illusion of reality is blown completely whenever anyone talks. As for the picture's significance, it comes to an inconclusive point. Its demonstration of injustice is like an exhibit in the bottle in the medical museum. It is grotesque, appalling, nauseating, but so framed and isolated that when you come away, you are left with the feeling that you have been witness to nothing more than a horrible, freakish incident. The absence of any French or suitably accented English dialogue in a highly focused portrayal of French soldiers continued to be a point of debate in U.S. critical analysis of Paths of Glory. Philip K. Scheuer, who wrote about films for the LA Times from 1920s to 1967, was another reviewer who addressed the issue again in the newspaper's January 16, 1958 edition. In a follow-up discussion about the controversial war picture, in a commentary subtitled Question of Foreign Accents Raised by Parts of Glory, Paths of Glory, Scheuer cites the style of speech used in the film and the screenplay's weak ending as two reasons he omitted the production from his selection of 1957's best. Like Bosley Crowther, he found the linguistics aspects of the dialogue wholly distracting. In Paths, Scheuer writes, the actors all employ ordinary colloquial English, much of it, I felt, delivered badly, although Adolphe Menjou, being of French descent, did convey a certain quality of Frenchness, adding the others were simply Hollywood types. The overending tone of the motion picture also evoked comments about the picture's marketability, namely its scant appeal to a very large segment of moviegoers. Grim is the word that frequently appears in contemporary reviews of the film, an adjective understandably applied given the story's brutal subject matter, and a word still commonly used in complimentary assessments by critics. In its March 18, 1958 edition, the Chicago Daily Tribune summarizes the film as a grim, forceful story presented in blunt, unvanished fashion, entirely lacking in the customary cliches, deftly directed. Whitley Williams, a critic for Variety, previewed the film 6 weeks before it opened at the Fine Arts Theater in Los Angeles. In his review, which was published on November 20th, 1957, Williams anticipates limited interest as well as limited box office revenue for the picture. Paths of Glory is a starkly realistic recital of French army politics in 1916 during World War I. While the subject is well handled and enacted in a series of outstanding characterizations, it seems dated and makes for grim screen fare, even with the Kirk Douglas star name to spark its chances. Outlook was spotty at best, and will need all the hard-selling United Artists, which is distributing the Bryna production, can muster. Harrison's reports an independent and advertisement-free film review journal in 1957 agreed with Variety's critic, and in November expressed doubts too that the World War I melodrama would be successful commercially after its general release in January 1958. Just how it will fare at the box office is a matter of conjecture, Harrison stated, characterizing its central theme as a grim and unpleasant study of man's humanity toward man. Edwin S. Schallert, a fellow critic of Philip Scheuer at the New York Times, also attended the film's first screening in Los Angeles on December 20th, 1957. The following day, the newspaper published Schallert's evaluation, which begins by classifying Paths of Glory as a minor contribution, but an interesting one, to the war effort on the screen. Next, he describes the drama's storyline in some detail before addressing specifically the film's final scene, which he found odd and disconnected in its presentation so soon after the grim gray execution. Suzanne Christian Schallert writes, is seen as a German girl forced to sing to a huge body of French troops right at the end of the picture, a peculiar sort of payoff for the miscarriage of justice, to which the whole gathering of men seems to be obvious. He then concludes Paths of Glory is a commendably sincere picture, very well told for the most part, though it does not fulfill itself in the best screen and entertainment terms. It is practically like a documentary. The review in Harrison's reports addressed the ending as well, maintaining that it was the picture's one weak spot was difficult to understand and leaves one with the feeling that it is inconclusive. The journal then offers its own interpretation of the final scenes from Harrison's perspective as Colonel Dax is returning to his quarters after his confrontations with his superior officers. He notices his soldiers enjoying themselves in a cafe. It disgusts him to think that they had so quickly forgotten their executed comrades, but he compassionately realizes that life must go on. Whitney Williams in Variety also commented about the film's finale, noting that it ends so abruptly the audience is left with a feeling of incompletion. Other assorted critics in newspapers and trade publications viewed the film's ending and the production's significance cinematically far different than that cited critics of the Los Angeles Times or the reviewers for Harrison's reports in Variety. Richard Gertner of the New York-based trade paper Motion Picture Daily was one of them. He, unlike Edwin Schaller, did not see Paths of Glory as a minor contribution to the genre of wartime portrayals, nor did he find its closing scenes peculiar, but instead poignant. After viewing what he termed a brilliant and arresting film only a few weeks after its world premiere in Munich, Gertner highly recommended it to his readers, many of whom were theater owners. He then advised those motion picture exhibitors not to misjudge the film's content in advance. Technically, this is a war picture, but any exhibitor who promotes it as just another action film will be making a serious mistake. Its exciting battle scenes and the suspense of a subsequent court-martial assured of appeal in that market, but also has deeper and stronger elements under the surface that will attract customers who like strong drama just as exciting as the physical events or the ideas about war and men that Kubrick trenchantly puts across about military discipline, the fallibility of those who carry it out, and the futility of attempting to fight it. These are timeless ideas relevant to any war. Let us hasten to add, however, that this is no message picture. The theme is implicit to the story and the characters. Finally, in contrast to Philip Schuer's omission of the production from his selection of 1957's best, Gertner ends his appraisal emphatically. No doubt about it, Paths of Glory is one of the strongest dramas of the year. In spite of issues being raised in various reviews about the film's manner of dialogue, its anticipating marketing challenges, and its ending in the United States in 1957 and 1958, there was near universal admiration expressed for the directorial abilities and technical expertise that the 29-year-old Kubrick exhibited in the production. Jane Carmody, the drama critic for the Evening Star in Washington, D.C., and winner of the Screen Directors Guild's Critics of the Year Award for 1956, commended Kubrick for directing a film with sting and doing so with chilling incisiveness. At the New York Herald Tribune, critic William Zinsser judges the film to be outstanding in his December 26, 1957 review. Zinsser describes Kubrick's direction and editing as first-rate. His scenes, Zinsser observes, are vivid and well composed, and he knows the art of cutting. The scenes make their point with economy and bite and move on. Even at this relatively early stage in Kubrick's career, directing feature films, he had already gained a reputation in the motion picture industry for commanding all aspects of his project and being, as one colleague described him, meticulous with everything from scripting to editing. What is notably missing, however, from Zinsser's comments or in other contemporary reviews about the quality of the production's cutting are any allusions to Eva Kroll, the film's credited editor, and her contributions in helping to construct or at least refine the end product. More than 3 decades after the release of Paths of Glory, U.S. director Robert Zemeckis paid homage to the film with the 1991 Tales of the Crypt episode Yellow. The episode was an adoption of the 1952 shock suspense stories Yellow, about a U.S. Army colonel whose son, the lieutenant, exhibits cowardice and is sentenced to face the firing squad. The father makes the son falsely believe that the firing squad will be firing blanks so that the son will not exhibit cowardice before his execution. Zemeckis cast Kirk Douglas and his son Eric Douglas in the father and son roles. Okay. I don't remember that Yellow episode of Tales from the Crypt. David Simon. Maybe I can look it up. David Simon, creator of the critically acclaimed television series The Wire, 2002 to 2008, has said that Paths of Glory was a key influence on the HBO crime drama. The influence of the film comes in its depiction of the tribulations of middle management in the form of Dax's unsuccessful attempt to protect his troops against the inhumane ambitions of his superiors, which in turn influenced The Wire's depiction of various institutions acting against individuals. Chicago Sun-Times critic Roger Ebert added the film to his great movies list on February 25, 2005. Years earlier, on a 1987 episode of the televised film review series At the Movies, critic Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune debated with co-host Ebert about the respective merits of several Kubrick productions. Siskel, in their discussions, declared Paths of Glory to be a near-perfect film, one that, in his opinion, was surpassed in overall quality only by Kubrick's dark comedy Dr. Strangelove. I'm not a big fan of Dr. Strangelove. I don't know why people enjoy this movie so much. An indication of the film's enduring popularity, can be found in the U.S. review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes. As of March 2025, the film holds a whopping 96% rating based on 77 reviews, with an average rating of another whopping 9 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Paths of Glory is a transcendently humane war movie from Stanley Kubrick with impressive, protracted battle scenes and a knockout ending. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 90 out of 100 based on reviews from 18 critics, indicating universal acclaim. In 1992, the film was deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress, and it was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry. In October and November 2004, the film was shown at the London Film Festival by the British Film Institute. It was carefully remastered over a period of several years. The original film elements were fixed. The original film elements were found to be damaged. Moreover, with the aid of several modern digital studios in LA, the film was completely restored and remastered for modern cinema. In addition, Stanley Kubrick's widow, Christine, who also appears in the closing scene as the German singer, made a guest appearance at the start of the performance. Okay, here's what Venture 6 is talking about. Home media. Where is Joe3697 is in the chat room. I don't know. I loved it the first time. The second time, I thought it was all right. Venture 6 says, but 2001 is my favorite Kubrick film. I'll have to go with Clockwork Orange. My favorite Kubrick film is Clockwork Orange. People like Dr. Strangelove and 2001. I'm not too much into that. 2001 has a lot of weird evolution themes in it. Dr. Strangelove, it's kind of goofy, actually. With Peter Sellers trying to control his Hitler salute, his Sieg Heil. Paths of Glory was released on VHS on July 21st, 1997, followed by the DVD version on June 29th, 1999. The Criterion Collection's first release of the film was for a Laserdisc release in 1989. Maybe that's what Avenger 6 is talking about. The Laserdisc. The film was released on DVD and Blu-ray by the Criterion Collection with a high-def digital transfer on October 26, 2010. Eureka released a UK Region 8 Blu-ray in 2016 as part of its Masters of Cinema line. In 2022, Kino Lorber detailed their upcoming 4K Blu-ray release of the film, restored from the original camera negative. This release also features an audio commentary by critic Tim Lucas. The edition was released on August 23rd, 2022. And here we are, Paths of Glory, 1957, 1 hour, 28 minutes. Gets a whopping 8.4 out of 10 on IMDb. An amazing score. There's a Criterion Collection trailer, which I also posted in the description, along with the free Tubi version of it. The trailer looks very poor quality print. Now that I'm watching it here, all right, it gets 235,000 ratings on IMDb. In terms of popularity, it's ranked 1,927 on IMDb, down 253. A colonel defends 3 of his soldiers in a court-martial after they abandon a suicidal attack. Reviewers say Paths of Glory is celebrated for its anti-war stance, showcasing war's futility and military leadership's corruption. The film is lauded for its technical excellence, including cinematography, direction, and Kirk Douglas's performance. It explores themes of courage, loyalty, and war's dehumanizing effects. Despite initial commercial and censorship challenges, it is now recognized as a crucial work in Kubrick's career and the war film genre. Okay, here's a review on IMDb from the Little Songbird, who gives it a 10 out of 10, the same rating that I'm giving it. Kubrick at the height of his powers, a wonderfully atmospheric film about the First World War. That's the title of the IMDb review from the Little Songbird, and it's dated December 8th, 2009, giving it a 10 out of 10. Perfect score. I saw this movie for the first time on television today after being persuaded by the reviews I read beforehand praising it. Also, I like Kirk Douglas, although I'm not directly familiar with Kubrick's work. A shameful admission, I know. Out of what I've seen so far, I love Dr. Strangelove, and despite only seeing it once while flicking through channels like The Shining 2, another great Kubrick film. So the top 4 are The Shining, Clockwork Orange, Full Metal Jacket, and Paths of Glory. Anyway, back on target, Paths of Glory was brilliant in my opinion. Winston Churchill famously claimed that it was this movie that was closest to evoking the atmosphere of World War I and the military mind. Nobel laureate Winston Churchill, who cut class so that he could play with his toy soldiers, who said, never, 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 never give up. And he made a funny comparison of free markets and socialism that I have to read to you. The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. That's a quote from Sir Winston Churchill. And you know what? He is right. For one thing, Paths of Glory is gorgeously filmed with relentlessly beautiful cinematography and nice costumes and scenery. The screenplay is sometimes humorous, sometimes moving, and sometimes even haunting. Either way, it was some fine writing. The efficiency of Kubrick's direction is proof of a great man at work. The performances were superb. As the general who orders the hopeless attack on the German position, Adolphe Menjou's character is perceived as a villain, not because of being an officer adhering to the letter, but that he is seen as the arrogant aristocrat because of his fear of the working classes and his hatred of the enemy. Among the cast, Timothy Carey and Kirk Douglas especially were outstanding. And the music, that is one rousing score, I can tell you. Great movie. 10 out of 10 from Bethany Cox. So Miss Cox enjoyed it, and so did Winston Churchill. You know it's a realistic movie when Sir Winston Churchill tells you it is. More like this: Faulty Towers, Cinema Paradiso, Apocalypse Now, and The Great Dictator. The futility and irony of the war in the trenches in World War I is shown as a unit commander in the French army must deal with the mutiny of his men, and a glory-seeking general, after part of his force falls back under fire in an impossible attack. That's the storyline from Keith Lowe at sfu.ca. Keith Lowe has a Jesuit San Francisco University email, the writer of the storyline on IMDb. Tagline is, never has the screen thrust so deeply into the guts of war. Banned in Spain under General Francisco Franco's dictatorship for its anti-military message. It wasn't released until 1986, 11 years after Franco's death. Colonel Dax commits a glaring military faux pas by jamming his hands into his pants pockets while standing and walking in the courtroom during the trial. No military officer would do such a thing, particularly in such a formal setting as a court-martial. Private Pierre Arnaud is quoted as saying, "I'm not afraid of dying tomorrow, only of getting killed." Soldier in the bunk says, "That's as clear as mud." Private Pierre Arnaud says, "Well, which would you rather be done in by, a bayonet or a machine gun?" Soldier in the bunk says, "Oh, a machine gun, naturally." Private Pierre Arnaud says, "Naturally, that's just my point. They're both pieces of steel ripping into your guts, only the machine gun is quicker, cleaner, and less painful, isn't it?" Soldier in the bunk says, "Yeah, but what does that prove?" Private Pierre Arnaud says, "That proves that most of us are more afraid of getting hurt than of getting killed. Look at Bernard. He panics when it comes to gas. Gas doesn't bother me a bit. He's seen photos of gas cases. Doesn't mean anything to me. But I'll tell you something, though. I'd hate like the devil without my tin hat, but on the other hand, I don't mind not having a tin hat for my tail." Why is that? Soldier in the bunk You're darn tootin' because Pierre Private Arnold, because I know a wound in the head would hurt much more than one in the tail. The tail is just meat, but the head is all bone. Soldier in a bunk, that's Private Pierre Arnold. Tell me this, aside from the bed, what are you most afraid of? Soldier in the bunk, high explosives. Private Pierre Arnold. Exactly. And it's the same with me because I know that it can chew you up worse than anything else. Look, just like I'm trying to tell you, if you're really afraid of dying, you'd be living in a funk all the rest of your life because you know you've got to go someday, any day. And besides, Soldier in the bunk says, yes. Private Pierre Arnold. If it's death that you're really afraid of, why should you care about what it is that kills you? Soldier in the bunk. Oh, you're too smart for me, Professor. All I know is nobody wants to die. The Criterion DVD version features the opening and closing MGM logos edited into Hal Kubrick 1999. Or is it High Kubrick? I guess it's High Kubrick 1999. Soundtracks La Marseillaise 1792, uncredited, written by Claude Joseph Roget de Lisle in the score during the opening credits. Release date December 25th, 1957 in the United States, country of origin United States. Languages English, German, Latin. Also known as Patraula Inferno. Filming locations Schwabheim, Oschelheim, Bavaria, Germany. Command headquarters. Production company Berna Productions. Budget of $93,000 estimated. Gross worldwide of $8,290. I think IMDb is off by about $1 million. Runtime 1 hour 28 minutes or 88 minutes. Color black and white. Sound mix mono, and an aspect ratio of 1.66 to 1. All right. Now going down my movies list, I've got God's Mighty Servant, 2011. Running Red, 1999. And My District Attorney, 1941. So I'll try to get through the 3-hour movie God's Mighty Servant, 2011 tomorrow. And we'll get this, we'll keep going down this list this weekend. I should be able to get that one knocked out. That'll be number 6 for this week. And then we'll try to get to and then we'll start the week Monday off with Running Red, 1999. Should be able to get to that Monday night. So that's the plan. I'm going to take a little nappy poo, go to church, and then get my teeth cleaned, pack my stuff here, and get the heck out of here. Laters.